Michael Franzese, one of the biggest moneymakers in Mafia history, made man in the Colombo crime family, son of notorious gangster Sonny Franzese, entrepreneur, YouTuber, and author. Previously, I made a video on one of his most popular books, I'll Make You an Offer You Can't Refuse, full of business advice, and it really piqued my interest, which is why I read this book, and I'm making a video on it today. Michael Franzese was making millions of dollars a week from operations that were legitimate and illegitimate. And he was racking in the millions of dollars from his illegitimate operations in the gasoline business. His gasoline operations got so big that the federal government tried to indict him several times on fraudulent cases, but he beat the case every single time. The feds couldn't touch him. They couldn't touch him, they had nothing on him, so they couldn't get him from the outside. So they had to work their way inside and destroy him from inside. That was the only way that they can get this guy. Now when the federal government can't even touch you, that's gangster. So the government was inflaming rumors that Franzese was getting so big that they were pushing the narrative in the media that he was going to break away from the Colombo crime family and start his own mafia family. People inside these mafia circles started speaking, rumors started going about, and people actually started to believe these to be true. So, naturally, the Colombo family can't let something like this go on. It's gonna be taking money out of their pockets, it's gonna start wars, rivalries, they have to settle it right then and there. So, Michael Franzese was called in for a sit-down. Now, if you know anything about the mafia, and if you have rumors and allegations on your name, and you get called for a sit-down at the same time, you're practically done for. One thing you know, your best friend walks you into a room, and that's it, you never walk back out. Now, Michael understood this very well. He understood that the chances of him surviving a sit-down were very low, he might get whacked. So he went to his father, Sonny Franzese. In the book, it describes that Sonny actually defended Michael some way, shape, or form, so now he was getting called in for a sit-down, and he's being responsible for his son's actions also. Michael goes and pleads with his father, saying, we don't have to go to the sit-down, we can run away, we can go out shooting, we don't need to explain nothing to nobody. But Sonny Franzese was a stone cold, to the book mafioso. He told Michael, his son, you got called for a sit-down. When you get called, you go. It doesn't matter what you think's gonna happen, you go. That's the rules, that's it. Now this brings us to our first point, that you can be loyal to a fault. Now think about how crazy this is for a second. That cause, that person, that group that you're so loyal to, you're willing to be killed by that same exact person that you've pledged your loyalty to. Out of, you can call it many things, tradition, love, passion, culture, whatever. Michael says in his book, we both knew about these meetings. They were part of the life. You walk into a meeting like that and you never walk out again. Instead of Dad and me banding together and going out in a blaze of gunfire, I knew he would want us to walk into that room at our scheduled times like lambs to a slaughter and passively accept whatever fate awaited us. Of all the aspects of the mob life I had grown to despise, the legendary death summons was the worst. Think about your current relationships. How many of those people that you know that aren't good for you are leading you towards your death? Not literally, but figuratively. How many of those relationships would you cut off? Why haven't you cut them off already? No, seriously, think about it. I mean, you just heard a story about two guys knew that they were probably gonna die when they walked into this room, and they had every chance they could to walk out and run away and never go into that meeting. And you're thinking, they must be crazy for willingly going into that meeting to get shot in the back of the head. And then they knew this. How many people are in your life that you could cut off that relationship where you're willingly keep going back to that person who's leading you down a dead path, leading you down a dead end, leading you down to your death? Why are you keeping that person around? Is it because of tradition, out of love, out of passion? It's because you were conditioned that way your whole entire life, the same way that these mob guys were conditioned their way their whole entire lives. That's the rules that they live by. It's just something to think about. You can be loyal to a fault, and you should be aware of it. Now, Michael obviously survived the sit-down. He could attribute it to luck, to being blessed, but from what I read from the book, I attribute it to his negotiation skills. Which brings me to my second point. When you're being threatened, you don't need a gun, you don't need to swing your fists or become violent to win battles. If you learn how to explain yourself and become a smooth talker, you're more dangerous with your words than you are with your weapons. Now, Michael opens up about what happened in the sit-down and how he got out of it. And he says the following: Russo and the other family capos grilled me on every aspect of my operation, but I was now in my element. I knew the life well, having learned from the best, my father, my hero. I answered them firmly in a strong, unwavering voice. I knew that if I couldn't go out shooting, I could certainly compete with my contemporaries in a war of wits. And that's what it comes down to a lot in life. You cannot simply stand up and threaten somebody, beat them up, put a gun to their face to get what you want. It's not gonna work in corporate America, it's not gonna work at school, it's not gonna work anywhere professional whatsoever. You want something done, you do it done by persuading people the right way. And that's what Michael is telling you to do. Get so strong with your words that not only they become your weapon, but they also become your shield. Now, eventually the feds do catch up to Michael and they indict him on racketeering charges. At this point of his life, he met a girl named Keahey who would eventually become his wife, and she was always encouraged him to take the role of a Christian and to believe in Jesus Christ. Michael writes in his book, "Keahey had encouraged me over and over to surrender control of my life to Jesus. I refused, believing I could handle my own affairs. And there I was, in an orange jumpsuit, sitting in a cell, buried deep within the cinder block walls of the federal jail. What a great example of God's work in my life, I thought. I was an embarrassment to myself, to my family, and to my God. And I had no one to blame but myself." That brings us to point number 3, and that is taking accountability. Imagine, you're making millions of dollars a week, you're pocketing cash, you're not paying taxes, you're keeping all of that money for yourself, and he lost everything, lost it all. But he still took accountability for everything that happened. You could become bitter, you could become extremely bitter. He could have become very bitter in life, but he didn't. He could have blamed the federal government for finally catching up to him. He could have blamed his father for being in the Mafia, and maybe if his dad wasn't in the Mafia, Michael would have never been in the Mafia, and his life would be completely different because before he was in the mob, he was studying to be a medical student. He could have blamed his family, he could have blamed his friends, but no, that's not what a man does. A man takes accountability for his actions. That's exactly what he did. And the story has a bright ending because when you take accountability for your actions one step at a time, it eventually leads you into a brighter spot. That's exactly why he's one of the most influential YouTubers in the space right now. Now, when you accept the circumstances that you're in and you take some sort of accountability, understanding that the situation you're in is because in some way, shape, or form, something that you did led you to be in the situation. You are now opening yourself to figuring out a way to get yourself out of that position. So don't point fingers for why your life sucks. Don't blame other people for the situations that you're in, financial ruins, a relationship that didn't work out, whatever it may be. Do not point the other finger because you got in a relationship with that person, but guess what? You probably ignored a lot of the red flags because you were so in love. You lost a lot of money because of that one person screwed you over, but guess what? You trusted that person in the first place. Maybe they really tricked you, but you have to take some accountability, understanding that you were the one that gave them the money and trusted them. To a certain degree, it is your fault. Take that accountability like a man and then move on with your life and don't make that mistake again.